Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the TweetCap. So, as the holidays approach and the year comes to an end, this terrible, horrible, no good, very bad year that is 2020, Matt and I wanted to go through all of the stories of 2020 and pick the most impactful trend that we could find in these categories. And we'll go over the categories in just a second. But before we do that, Matt, how are you?
Excellent. I'm very excited to end this off right. My last podcast whatsoever in the 2020, whether
Yep.
it's productive conversations or the tweet cap. So I'm excited to put a I'm excited to put a rub to this, put a cap to it, and might as well review everything that has gone on with this year. It's crazy how both easy and hard it was to see these stories and remember them because of obviously what happened. So
Hmm.
finally, it's finally nice that we're talking about at the end of this, and we'll be onto greener pastures, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, when we were going through this, the list that Matt and I had definitely had some recency bias in it. And then we did talk to some other
Hmm.
people, and they went through their stories. And so I think we have a pretty good mix of what was really impactful in terms of the news of 2020. And there is a lot of impact. So real quick, just to go through how we're going to do this, we have six categories. Those categories are politics, news, sports, music, tech, and then culture and entertainment. We tried to separate it because, I mean, this was a crazy hard task, as you guys can all probably guess. I'm sure there's a million things that everyone remembers right now about this year, personal and, of course, in the world. So we thought those six were the most broad while still giving some clarity to what we're talking about. And then after asking around and discussing, we picked a couple of stories that we're going to share with everyone today. So, Matt, are you excited?
Very much so. I'm looking forward to talking about this and talking about how it's over. We don't
Yes,
have to reflect on no more.
most importantly, it's over. We no longer have to reflect on the year of our Lord 2020. So let's get down to it. First and foremost, politics. This was an election year, as you know, Matt.
Yep.
So politics was everywhere. And people had been talking about the presidential election, their local
Mhm.
elections, and some other stories uh, pretty much since 2019.
Right.
2020 has been defined in no small part by the presidential election and all of the events that led up to it. But three stories to me stood out, Matt. And those stories were first and foremost, Joe Biden gets elected president.
Yep.
There's a new president in town starting next year in 2021. The GOP and Democratic presidential conventions were trending. A, because they were multiple nights, which is always good for trending, and B, because of just how differently the two parties did it. One being completely virtual for the most part, and
Yep.
the other being almost not virtual at all, being
Yep.
completely attended. Um, and last, and this is gonna this might even surprise you, Matt. Donald
Mhm.
Trump's impeachment.
People, it's hard. It's
This is a
crazy
2020
how
story.
it's weird that this was well, not overshadowed, but I mean, this happened back what January, February, right before
Hmm.
the pandemic. I mean, this year, the fourth ever president was impeached. For the fourth time ever, I should say, a president was impeached, and
Yep.
this whole year overshadowed that historic feat. So if you're asking, so you were saying we're going to answer now, which we
Yeah.
think is the
So
most relevant.
I guess I think the question is between the three that we picked, and again, there's so many other ones, but between the three that we kind of identified and that people brought up to us, what do you think was the most, or was not the most? I don't use the word most. The biggest story in politics in 2020.
I would have to say, anytime the White House changes hands, that is the most significant story in America. And I would have to go with Joseph Biden winning in the 2020 election. And I believe that him, and with that win came a lot of historic marks. His running mate, Kamala Harris, becomes the first woman president.
Vice
Becomes the
President.
first woman vice president, first person of color vice president, first Indian American vice president. We have an exciting cabinet of all diverse members that have been announced throughout the last few weeks, which includes, I believe, Secretary of Education from Connecticut. Fun fact.
I didn't know that. Look at that.
Yes, and we just it's been quite a time. I'm excited for a change. I believe the last 4 years warranted a new change right now, and exactly a month from 2 days ago, I'm excited for things to change hands. Hopefully, it is peacefully. Maybe finally now we're seeing that Trump is accepting his fate. I don't know, or at least he's
Moving
not being
on.
vocal, or at
Yeah.
least he's not being vocal about it. He announced his pardons at the time of this podcast, so you always know that's when the president knows it's over, it's
Yeah.
slow, and we're seeing, even with that, in the changing of powers, that President Trump is not going down quietly one way or the other. Whether it's announcing
Yeah. Yeah.
his refusal of signing the COVID relief bill until payments are raised to $600 per American to 2,000. But
Hmm.
hey, as we were talking about in our text, how different that will be once Biden enters the door, we will
Yeah.
only see from there, and we can talk about that sure when it's that time, when we
Yeah.
cross that
I'm
bridge.
sure 2020 will bring that conversation back up.
But yeah,
Unfortunately.
I do think that Biden winning president number 46 is a big deal. What about you, Ryan? How do you feel about?
Yeah.
What do you think? Who do you think is the biggest story? That's what I think. What do you?
So when I was going through the first list, the big list, before we got to this final three, impeachment stood out to me because of how
Mhm.
early it was, and
Yeah.
I was so sure that I was going to say impeachment, and you were going to say impeachment. But
Mhm.
after talking about it, just now in this little beginning kind of intro we did, going over the three,
Interesting.
it's definitely, yeah. I mean, we just forgot about that. Is it historic? Sure, but no one cares. No one cared.
You don't really see like
Upon millions of people voted in this election for
yeah.
both candidates. No one cared. It had no impact. Maybe some marginal impact. Maybe. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to justify that. You know, it's a neat little. Unfortunately, just neat is not the right word, but it's the only word I have right now.
Mhm.
It's a neat little historical tidbit for people like me to talk about for years to come. But it wasn't the biggest story of 2020 in politics. It has to be the election that got weeks of coverage. It helped that it took weeks to
Yeah,
sort
months
out.
of coverage,
Yeah,
depending
months
who
of
you
well,
ask.
yeah, that's because various people decided just to pretend it didn't happen for a while. But no, there's really no way to there's no way around it. That was the biggest politics story of 2020, and there's nothing anyone can really say to justify otherwise. I
And
think.
also, the how long it took to have an official winner. Election is on a
Well, I
Tuesday, and
mean,
on Saturday afternoon, it took the Saturday early afternoon for it to win.
we've had longer.
True, true, but it's just also an interesting tidbit amongst that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. This was definitely not a regular election. This definitely had some extra hurdles to
Yep.
jump through rather, and you know, the ultimate result of it, probably the biggest news of 2020. Time certainly thought so.
Uh-huh.
We talked about that on
Right.
the podcast.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think we're in agreement on the politics biggest story, but politics is only one part of the news. A lot of people don't know that because if you watch cable news, it appeared to be the entire part of news.
You're
But
right.
in general, encompasses everything that happens. I mean, and this was probably the longest list um, to to put together. I think I don't know about you. I know I wasn't going to do this, but I mean, something I didn't mention at all on this list of three. I mean, the California wildfires happened all this year.
Hmm.
Uh, that's just just a fun tidbit, not fun at all, horrifying. But in the midst of a pandemic, and in the midst of political uh, mobilization on both sides, a whole part of the country was just on fire.
Right.
Um, but I would say that the biggest,
Australia had fires too.
yes, in
Wasn't
Australia
Australia
had their
bad
fires. Those
in
ended in
February?
2020. Yeah, I think they
Hmm.
ended though. It was like boom boom, start end. But for news, the three that we narrowed it down to were the COVID-19 vaccine. Again, COVID-19 can be from the very first case to the very first hospitalization to the climbing number of deaths. You could put literally any COVID story and reasonably say it was the most impactful, the biggest story of the year. But I decided to try and be a little bit more optimistic heading into a new year, uh, that the vaccine would be the story, kind of the stand-in story for COVID. Um, Amy Coney Barrett gets sworn in to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Of course, with that comes the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and a couple other things. Again, political in some ways, but apolitical in many other ways. Outside of the politics of confirming a Supreme Court justice,
Mhm.
their job is not political, but it does have a large impact on the way our country operates and about the justice system in this country in some ways. So that was one of them. And the last one was the Black Lives Matter marches. Again, similar to COVID, there was an enormous amount of stories that fit into this, with each unfortunate killing. Obviously, all of the marches, which is what we ended up putting down, and all of the fallout. The people who stood up, the activists who were leading these movements. But again, to try and put the most positive foot forward, the most hopeful foot forward going into 2021, we wanted to talk about the marches and the way that those are activating people and making everyone's voice heard in a way that hadn't been happening previously. So
Right.
again, this is a heavy one. We're done with the heavy ones after this, which is nice. But what do you think is the most impactful, the biggest story of 2020 when it comes to the news, the non-political news?
I think the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020 is the biggest news story. It really allowed the country to go to halt. It allowed other nations to follow. And for the hundreds and hundreds of years, people of color have been victims of prejudice. People putting them down and having their issues not addressed. Finally, it started a conversation this summer. Finally, it's getting recognized. Whether that's the help of social media, whether it's the help of I don't know. I don't want to say. I don't want to say because it's very important. It was quote unquote trending, but you saw people who may have not necessarily fight for this cause start fighting for this cause now.
Well, I mean,
Whether
in
it was
fairness, like the reason we're talking about it is because it was trending. You know what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean? Like we
I
can't
guess I just
separate it. It
wanted to
was a, it
use
was a
a
big part of the a
like
big part of what made it such a big story this particular time around.
yeah. I guess I wanted to say I just don't want to take. I want to make it as professional. I don't want to take anything like I don't want to be trending like a trending topic with
Right.
YouTube, even though I guess it really was. But you just saw so many people finally making their voice heard. It definitely made it probably affected our election, especially on a local and state standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows if this made an impact on President Trump, Mr. Trump's presidency? Would he have gotten reelected if this didn't happen? You have to look behind. You have to really research that, but I think it did make an impact on deciding who went in office. And it was really the first time like we had so many people talking about this, and obviously the discussions got extreme for some people. We talked about people. I don't personally don't think they should air dirty laundry on social media, but it is. We see so many people who are like, I'm not talking to this family member anymore because they don't stand by this movement. Their
Mm-hmm.
actions kind of prove that they aren't for this movement. And I really think, obviously, this helped, what, quote, not helped, but I guess for lack of a better word, helped boil this discussion as so many people are locked in quarantine and a mixture of cabin fever, emotion, and genuine want for change led to a huge impact. It
Mm-hmm.
affected sports. It affected corporations. It the fight for social justice is as prominent as ever, and we can't stop fighting for it. We can't forget what happened, and now that we have elected new officials, we need to put that pressure on to make sure that something like the deaths of George Floyd or anyone else is not forgotten, and that all right, we put you all in this position, make the changes we demanded for. And some other people sadly lost their lives going to fight this cause. And now I think this really scarred America for the right reasons. And even though it's very tough and it made it very uncomfortable and it will continue to, I think this was made such an impact, like it did in 68. And now we need to make sure we don't forget it. So sorry, very long answer for that, but it's been
Oh, you're
quite a time
good.
with
You're good,
that.
dude. Like I said, I worry. So I actually went different. So we have our first split on number two.
Mhm.
I went with the COVID-19 vaccine. Um, Everything you said was spot on. There was nothing I disagree with in what you
Yeah,
said. Actually, I worry though. We talked about at the very end. You mentioned it changed sports leagues, and it did change the NBA. I would say specifically. I don't know if other sports leagues might like to say that they changed because of the Black Lives Matter movement, but I don't
mhm.
know if their actions have actually proven that yet. And anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about can go ahead and look at the first Kansas City Chiefs games back
Mhm.
with live audience to get a little bit of context.
Right.
That was trending for quite some time. And then you mentioned businesses as well, and I think that goes to what you were talking about at the very beginning about trendiness. I don't believe that the movement is about trending. I don't believe
Yeah,
that the goals should be, just a trendy topic. I think that they're definitely uh, very legitimate concerns and very legitimate requests. But I do worry that some of the support is, a mile wide and an inch deep.
yeah,
And we won't know that, unfortunately, in 2020 because 2020 was really the catalyst for not the catalyst because the movement actually existed. Black Lives Matter wasn't created in 2020,
yeah,
uh, but it was really reinvented and reinvigorated in 2020. So I almost wonder if, hopefully, in the years to come, we see more stories and more change. Maybe even some actual legislation that the
yeah,
movement is able to push through. I think with COVID, the vaccine in particular, I mean that's a medical marvel.
for
Nine
sure.
months, 9 months is unheard of, and yeah, there's some things that we probably don't know about COVID in general, and about the vaccine that we'll have to contend with as we go forward. But to be able to do something
Right.
to put an end to this in that short amount of time, uh, I think that's just a medical marvel. I don't know if we, like you and I, have had any similar experience. We've grown up literally in probably the most impressive age in terms of
Mhm.
technological change, because of how old we are and when we were born. At the very end of the 90s, we really grew up, with memories in the early 2000s.
Yes,
And so we literally lived probably the fastest developing time since, I don't even know, since like maybe like the 60s, the 50s,
right.
40s,
Yeah,
somewhere in
no,
there.
you're
And so it's to have something genuinely surprise us who have seen literally the world change overnight more times than any previous generation could even have imagined.
for sure.
I think it's big, and hopefully it works. Obviously, I'll sound like an idiot if it doesn't work or if something happens, and I'm okay with that. For now, all things being what they are, all the information that we have, I think that what was accomplished, not even necessarily from how effective it gets rolled out, but just how quickly and efficiently we developed a brand new type of vaccine that we've never done before and got it out to the public is, really just, again, it's a marvel, I think. Uh,
And I
and so
hope
that's kind of where I fell on that one.
no, you make great points. Again, I don't disagree with anything you said either. And we need it. And we could go all day about. I don't know why it is a debate about vaccines. I understand the concerns, but I just felt me personally. When push comes to shove, I feel that the human race, or I should say mankind, especially its most genuine and intelligent, can create this sort of almost
Yeah,
miracle. And I get it, quote unquote, how fast it took and all this stuff. And I hope it's not like that politically, but it's just in the pandemic where we haven't seen one like this, every 100 years.
Mhm.
You would think that all the smartest people in the entire world can come together to figure out this medical miracle.
True.
And so far, December 15th is when we had our first in America. So it's only been a week and a half.
Mhm.
I think we'll be okay. And I'm not a medical
That's the
expert.
hope.
I think just for the sake of getting to our lives again and not being in fear of catching a virus,
Or this virus. You
this
always catch a
virus or any
but
virus, to cannot catch the COVID-19, please trust that science will prevail in this.
yeah, obviously.
Today I had last minute Christmas shopping, and it was way more. On a regular day, it's just a busy day, but you're just like, man, there must be some idiot. Okay, I won't say idiot. I take that back. But there could be some person
Right.
who
They might
might
even know.
vary it, and I went to a different liquor. I bought wine for my aunts, and my aunt and grandma
Mhm.
went to another liquor store. It was just too much. I couldn't trust it. I couldn't take the
I
risk.
I hear you. I've done that before too.
So
You just gotta walk away sometimes.
this is exactly why we need to take this damn vaccine or trust it, so I don't have to be in fear of doing a regular task.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree.
So,
But there you go. So for people who say we agree too much, there you go. Our first split. TweetCap history. But we're gonna move on. This one, actually, one of the harder ones, and I'll tell you why. Because it's sports. As you know, sports didn't really happen this year. They all, a version of sports happened. But
yeah.
compared to the massive list of newsworthy, stories and the massive list of political scandals, political stories, there wasn't a lot in the sports world. We had champions that we've had before, for the most part. We've had, the good players were good. The less good players remained less good. There wasn't a lot to talk about, but one of the things that I put into sports um, on the list, and it's in this final three, is the NBA bubble working, which
Mhm.
is not inherently a sports story, but it's very sports heavy. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the NBA came up with a plan, as did everyone but the NFL, to try and contain coronavirus by limiting access to their players and making it so spread would be much harder. And we saw it was the most extensive plan. It was also the most effective plan. The NFL, their plan was non-existent, and surprise, several teams got sick, whole teams. The MLB also had a regional plan. It worked okay, but we covered the Justin Turner story on this podcast, so it very famously didn't work okay toward the end. But the NBA's bubble was very effective. Another NBA story, this one also from earlier in the year, also a bit of a downer, so I lied a minute ago and I said it was all up from here. The death of Kobe Bryant in a helicopter crash was, that almost it did transcend sports. But he was a sports icon, played for the Lakers. And again, that consumed a lot of time and was very much, on the top of everyone's mind, even if you weren't a Lakers fan or even if you weren't really a sports fan. Kobe Bryant meant more than any one sport. He kind of embodied sports in general. And then this one, a little wacky, but the Paul brothers' boxing careers have taken off into full effect in 2020. What started as a joke for YouTube, what I assume is YouTube clout, I think a year ago in 2019, has resulted in some very, very serious aspirations and some very, very serious words exchanged by real fighters and two brothers who make YouTube videos. So I think I know
Who would have
where you're
thought?
going to go with this. Yeah. But what do you think the biggest, most impactful story in sports was in 2020?
I think Kobe Bryant's death. It seemed the world stopped for a week for how
Yep.
for how valuable an athlete he was. Everybody, obviously, if you were a sports fan or not, you were very aware of Kobe Bryant's impact in the NBA. And like I said, the
People at
world,
my office cried.
yeah, like I said, people
About it.
stopped for the world stopped for a week. I think it'll be one of those "Do you remember where you were when?"
Yeah,
moments for people, especially those who remember it. And uh,
it was
that
also
that wound,
pre-pandemic.
yeah, was pre-pandemic. It's just it's a wound that it's gonna be hard to heal, but we just will not forget Kobe's legacy, obviously. But I think that's going to be the one for me for the biggest story in sports.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, Kobe's obviously got some complications in his history, but complicated or not, uh, again, you're exactly right. It's where were you sort of thing. I think everybody's going to have a memory, even if you're doing something mundane. And again, to
Right?
cap it all
That's what
off,
I was doing. I was
it
doing the
happened right before rather the whole world shut down.
yeah,
So, I mean, this is just horrible to say, but for a lot of people, it was their last like memory. It was their last like big you know, event. Like I said, I went on a trip to Arizona, just kind of like a small thing in January of 2020, which it feels like I went years ago, but it was literally,
about that.
uh, yeah, like less than a year, just about a year. But I think like I want to go back to Arizona so bad, and I don't know if it's because I really loved Arizona, or if it's because it was just the last cool thing I got to do
Right.
before the world stopped. And so, for some people, like yeah, this was it. Like right, this happened, and right after that, everything closed.
Yep.
Nothing could be done. So I mean, talk about impact to be one of the few stories pre-COVID, because for the last 9 months we've only heard about COVID stories for the most part, with some politics thrown in. So to be to have such an impact that
Don't forget us as
uh,
politics.
yes, don't forget us this pop. Never one to be ignored. Politics always strikes back. But no, the whole world, again, especially for how divided we all ended up being. I think the whole world was in equal shock about what happened,
Yep.
and about how they felt was just universal sympathy and grief, which not that many people could command.
Nope.
So I think you're right. Kobe Bryant, obviously a titan of sports, but also just a titan of culture. As we saw, anyone who didn't know that beforehand was given an education, unfortunately, in January, February, because yeah, yeah, there's not much more to say around that.
Mhm.
Uh, I can't believe that the Paul brothers boxing is the third one on that list, though. We wanted something else. I know you wanted something else. I definitely wanted something else, but I was like, honestly, they've been trending. I know it's kind of recent, and I was like, maybe it's recency bias. And I went back, and I was like, the Lakers won a championship. We've seen that before. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
Like there just wasn't, there wasn't a lot in sport. I didn't want to do Justin Turner again. That ended up being okay. By the way, we said we'd follow up on that story. I think we could do that now. All turned out fine. Still very stupid, but at least in this particular case, it didn't end up hurting anybody besides, of course, Justin Turner himself, who was sick. But we're gonna go to music now. We're gonna do culture and entertainment last because that's kind of our bread and butter, being who you are and being who I am. But music was kind of weird. I haven't been in a big music mood 2020. I don't have you?
Not really, no. I mean, you pay attention, listen to any of the big new albums, whether it's The Weekend or, I mean, this is more mainstream, but Weekend, Kid Cudi, um, I like Juice WRLD's last album. I think those but yeah, there's nothing I really sought out and seeked for. But hey, I just love music either way.
Yeah, and like I said, I love music too, but just for whatever reason this year I wasn't feeling music. Maybe it's because of the
It's hard to
circumstances, but
it's hard to see them perform their new music on
yeah,
various shows, and
you're right. It's
I
hard to
think
promote
it
music too because
stinks.
they're not out there doing the shows, doing the music videos, doing the concerts.
Yeah.
But some of the biggest stories that we saw in music, and this one I actually had to research a little bit because like I said, I didn't have anything that sprang to mind initially, other than one that I didn't put on that ended up not making the top three, and I'll tell you that one after.
Hmm.
But the three are Oh God, another downer. I keep saying there's no more downers, and I keep saying downers. Um, Ozzy Osbourne came out and said he had Parkinson's. He's diagnosed with Parkinson's. So, obviously a great music legend, great performer. Uh, you just did that song with
Post Malone.
Post Malone, which I really like.
Mhm.
But that might very well be his send off in terms of new music or collaborations, because Parkinson's is not something that uh, is conductive to having a very long career, especially at his advanced age as it is. So that was kind of disappointing, to hear, and to get that information. That was, again, very early in the year. That was before all of the other news kind of took over. Um, we've talked about this one before, but I think it is worth mentioning. The Weeknd is performing at the Super Bowl, following up from J-Lo and Shakira, which frankly could have been on this list too. It's not on the top three that we put together, but The Weeknd is, a newer artist, so they're continuing with the old trend of the newer, more pop artists, as opposed to some of these, uh, more iconic performers. And we kind of talked about, we're both excited. I'm excited for The Weeknd. I think he's going to do a great job. But I could see why, we talked about how it used to be people like, you know, The Who, Rolling Stones. Yeah, it was fine. But, very different approach now. And last but not
Hmm.
least, Bob Dylan sells his entire music collection. So have you heard about this one? This is recent.
Yep, yep.
And so $300 million is the speculated sales price. And it includes songs that, Bob Dylan famously has always owned all of his own stuff. He doesn't, that's kind of his shtick. He doesn't let the man tell him what to do. That's kind of how he rose to prominence, for those of you who don't know who Bob Dylan is. But songs like Rolling Stone, I should say, in particular, that's obviously an iconic song of his. Again, he's always retained the rights to that one, and now he doesn't have them. He sold the rights to those songs, so I think very soon, probably the beginning of 2021, maybe just in time for the Super Bowl, we're gonna hear like 17 Bob Dylan songs in commercials,
Right.
because they officially have he officially sold it. They're no longer his to he got paid, but he won't be able to tell them what to do with his music anymore. So
Hmm.
um, with those between those three, what do you think for music? What probably has the biggest impact on the industry and the biggest impact in 2020?
I'll go with I'll go with this for a long term reason, but with Bob Dylan selling his royalties, what can that mean long term for other artists? For other, especially other classic artists. Bob Dylan's obviously a living legend, but he is up there, so
Yep,
maybe the time to say that.
79?
Yeah, whether it's I think now some of those bands we thought were really old as kids, now
Now
they're
they're
quite
actually really old.
quite an advanced age. Well, whether you're Paul McCartney, just released an album very recently, I think
Yep.
this past month, Rolling Stones. What
Oh,
could
that
this
should have been on
mean?
the list.
What could this mean on a long-term standpoint? I understand if Bob Dylan is not played by Gen Zers, except the really hipster ones, but could this be a way that the music industry, I mean, we know how controversial the music industry and record labels are, especially in terms of ownership of artists, but now we see artists just selling them outright, obviously for a lot of money. What could this mean on the long-term standpoint, where artists are having a hard time getting real cash solely for their music before they get sponsorships and these special deals? Talk about the actual record label itself. Could this mean anything long term? And that's why I'll go with that as my story.
So we agree again. Like I said, when we got the category, when we decided to do music as its own category, the first thing I thought of was Eddie Van Halen. But when you really look at it, obviously, important living legend. Now not living, but was a living legend. Uh, there wasn't a lot that changed with the music industry when that happened. It was a big trend. It was, very important. But the Bob Dylan story, it kind of flies with another one that was on the longer list of Taylor Swift
Right.
re-recording every song she's ever released because she doesn't own the rights to them.
Unbelievable.
Someone else does, and so she's re-recording and re-releasing every single song she's ever done. And remember, she started at 15 years old, so now a 30-year-old woman is going to sing songs that she wrote at 15 because she doesn't have the rights to them. They're not hers anymore. So this is, like I said, this is interesting. At the same time, what I would categorize, and this is no disrespect, as one of the most corporate pop star acts ever, and Taylor Swift. I mean, she's
Yep.
corporate packaging personified in a lot of ways. Is sticking it to the man, and in defiance of the established order, going against the grain and taking her songs back, and then the king of sticking it to the man, the original, if you will, decided to cash in. He said, maybe it's because he's 79 years old. He's like, I don't need this anymore. What do I care if Subaru wants to play like a Rolling Stone in the background of one of its commercials? I'm getting paid. It doesn't matter. Maybe it's age, but it's kind of weird. It's like a weird topsy-turvy to see Bob Dylan be the one who's pro the establishment, and Taylor Swift being the one who's taking on the established order of things. But yeah, I agree for everything you said in terms of how does it change what's going to happen. Bob Dylan's very lucrative deal could change for better or for worse the way a lot of artists handle their own music.
Yep.
And so moving on, tech. This was kind of a fun one. I was looking at everything we've talked about. We don't talk about tech very much on this show. So far.
Oh, New Year's resolution, right? To add, but not many technological advances recently, but
true. Nothing crazy.
Make that change.
But I would say the three biggest things in tech were probably one, Zoom gets relaunched. Zoom, not new. This entire podcast has been recorded on a Zoom call. But nonetheless, Zoom went from Skype's annoying little cousin to the most important technological invention in the United States and possibly the world.
Apple. Since the Apple, since the Macintosh or the iPhone, the smartphone, yeah.
Yeah, which is even weirder because Zoom has existed. But they've changed a lot. They've beefed up security. They've changed the way people access Zoom, and so I would say Zoom is a big story.
Yep.
And the resurgence of Zoom is a big story. This one we did talk about though. Quibi fails. For those of you who don't know, Quibi is a already forgotten streaming service, and what makes it so interesting is more people, this is statistics, have been glued to television and streaming than ever before. Netflix is one of the most profitable, because it can't go anywhere. But Netflix is at its most profitable. It's one of the most profitable organizations this year, for obvious reasons. And yet, a streaming service literally had to close. More people are watching than ever before, and they couldn't capitalize. And by the way, in addition, like I said, to you and I kind of thinking that this would be on the list, I did some research. And other people are putting Quibi on their tech lists too, other blogs and other websites. So Quibi, no one will remember who you are after 2020. So go ahead and take your bow. This is your year of relevance. Kept it tight, kept it to a year. And then lastly, the launch of the next-gen game consoles. We've talked about this in regards to, recently in regards to the Cyberpunk 2077 game.
What's the update of that at this time, Ryan?
So that one's going to appear on another list. I won't say anything just yet. But Cyberpunk might be the first game released for next gen, but the console themselves, again, both state of the art. Both of them have backwards compatibility like never before. So if you bought a game, you can play that game even if you buy a new console, which is completely different than how everyone else in tech works. The entire tech industry is obsolescence. I mean, your phones break, everything breaks. Your headphones break. They change the chargers. It's insane, really. But Microsoft and Sony went in a different direction They want you to be able to use more of the stuff you already paid them for, not less. So all that being said, what is our pick for the biggest tech story of 2020?
I think, though I would love to talk about the Quibi. I have to say Zoom. I just say Zoom is the biggest story. Zoom has turned into a cultural phenomenon. Obviously, to keep to in sense of keeping a lot of businesses to continue their workflow, but it's the ultimate communicator. Our podcasts are not possible without Zoom. Literally, Zoom as it's become an adjective for this world. Hey, let's Zoom this, let's Zoom that, and
Yeah, it's like Google
yeah,
and it did it in like 9 months. It went
that's
from
bizarre.
no one having it to everyone using it as shorthand for people FaceTime now, but they're saying Zoom. My grandmother did that actually. She
Literally,
FaceTimed, but she said she was on Zoom. We had to explain to her that wasn't the case, just because we understood and that was fine. But if anyone ever asked her to Zoom, she couldn't just call them on FaceTime.
that's
We
hilarious.
had to
Who really
explain
needs to
that.
FaceTime? Honestly, I
Yeah,
mean, except it's just a slightly
it's a
better
little easier.
quality.
Yeah.
It's a tad bit easier, but yeah, Zoom has easily slid into this to the culture of this world, and we obviously know why. I will.
Yeah.
I. It's hard to say if it really. It's hard to say if it would have gotten this traction without the pandemic. I have no idea. I
I
was
don't either.
doing
I don't think it would have actually. That's what makes it insane
my
to me.
last. I think it's true. Like the very last when I was my last production job, I was doing Skype auditions.
Yeah,
Skype,
Skype
not
dropped the
Zoom
ball.
auditions. Yes, it's. I really
Skype had a
don't
head
know.
start.
I don't know how they messed that up. I really couldn't tell you the difference between a Skype and a Zoom. You're still able to record both like this. I don't know. It's just whoever came up. You want to know something, Ryan? I swear this
Differences in
is
a lot
true.
of stockholders. That's the difference at this point.
In 2018, before the
Mhm.
Zoom pop. So
I
somebody
like that. We
talked
got to
about
coin that
this.
term, the Zoom pop.
Yeah. So you had I know it's funny how you think about Mike Francesa.
Mhm.
It's always funny to show your reaction to his opinions, but he's also a big stock guy. But I heard in a podcast like 6 months ago from 2018, guys, you have to check out this app. It's like in his Long Island accent, like, boys, you have to
Mhm.
check out what's going on with the Zoom.
Mhm.
This Zoom app is going to be huge. It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge.
No way.
Zoom.
He didn't
I
know that.
swear to God,
He
I will
didn't know
show you
that.
that.
Not a
I'm
chance.
sending you the podcast
All
right
right.
now where
Not a
he
chance.
is on record of saying that Zoom is going to be the biggest thing in 2018. Where he interviewed on Alex
No
Rodriguez's
way people knew
podcast.
that. No way people
He
knew that.
said
There's
it.
not
He
a way.
said it.
Because I did the same thing too, man. As soon as this thing started, I mean, I don't do a lot in stocks, but I went on and I took Slack chat. You know Slack chat?
Yeah, of course. It's
People
another
use
way.
it for work all the time
Yeah.
anyway. And now people were working remotely. I'm like, Slack's going to be huge. Dude, I lost money every month.
So you
There's no
really?
way. Yeah, I sold
When
it.
did you? When did you sell?
I don't remember when I sold it. It was a few
But
months ago.
before okay.
Yeah, it was 2020. But like, there's no way you can tell me somebody knew not only that communications companies are going to be huge in 2020, but then
He
correctly
didn't say
predict
specifically
which ones.
2020, but he said he didn't specifically
Doesn't
say
matter. Still,
2020,
same
but he
thing.
said
There's no way you
this is
can
gonna
tell
be.
me. Yeah, there's
He
no way you can
said
tell
it.
me someone said communication is going to be big. You got to buy communication, and then they accurately predicted which of like the 1,700 communications options was actually going to be big.
As we
So
said, it's because of the 2020
yeah,
pandemic is why the communication
absolutely.
is big. But he said I sent you the very podcast where he's
He's
on
the
record of
luckiest guy in
saying
the world. Then
I'll feel.
I
He'd
just thought
probably tell you that himself.
that's true. He might tell you. He might actually agree with me there. But I
So
mean, that's pure luck to
it
get
is.
that right. Because I mean, it took literally a health crisis to make that true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you 200%. I'll give you 200%. Zoom, like I said, I would love to give Quibi its its last hurrah
Mhm.
in the spotlight. But even even putting it on the list, that's as high as it goes. Quibi is the failure, no matter what.
I,
The Zoom pop. I'm gonna use it from now on. The
the
Zoom
Zoom pop.
pop of 2020 is the biggest story in technology, I think. You're absolutely right.
Here's what I want to say about the Zoom, though.
Yeah.
The big thing, I think we've seen the influence of celebrity mightily decrease to the average human being. Would you say
On
that?
Zoom?
No, in general, celebrities' impact on the world. And here's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
Quibi's big selling point, we have every celebrity you could think of involved with the
Yeah, but
project
nobody
here.
cared
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
because the
Like
projects were not as good.
that's
Some were
definitely a
probably
point
fine,
to it
but
too. But I think it really shows it's an awesome way to it was just an awesome way to show what not to do with this. Even a pandemic, even a pandemic is not going to stop if you hire everyone in the world to work in this. Even a pandemic, they don't care. It shows that content is key. Quality. It's ironic to say I still believe quality over quantity. Even though we have so much quantity more than ever, there's not one quality Quibi project that everyone referred back to. It's like, damn, I'm so sad.
This is the one, yeah.
Whether it's Chrissy, what's the girl married to John Legend?
Chrissy Teigen.
Chrissy Teigen's Judge show failed.
Chrissy Teigen legend. I don't know. I think she had opinions.
That Chrissy Teigen, but Chrissy Teigen didn't work. Chase the Rapper's revival of Punked, the Fugitive revival. You know, there was a stupid show about it, Golden Arm.
Yeah.
It just
Even
showed that what
Apple
a failure.
even Apple TV had a couple of like, hit shows.
Yeah, exactly.
And they didn't have very much at all. You know who else doesn't have a hit, by the way?
Who?
The next one to go?
Who?
Peacock.
That's
the worst decision they made, though.
You're right. Peacock, in a sense of trying to get. I just like the available movies there because they have a lot of old movies.
Yeah, but those are already released.
But exactly,
I would just sell them to Hulu or Netflix.
It's only for a person like me who loves Peacock in that sense. But yeah, everyone. But except if you're a real cinephile, what do you need Peacock for?
You don't. They would make more money if they just cut a deal with, again, Hulu or Netflix. Don't they own Hulu? Isn't Disney own all of them?
No, that's all NBC Universal. They're on their own entity.
But I'm saying they know that NBC doesn't own Hulu.
No.
I'm asking, does Disney own Hulu or does NBC?
Disney owns Hulu. The Disney Corporation owns Hulu.
Yeah, because NBC doesn't. They're not part of that. All right.
Nope.
Then I don't know.
Competitors.
Some to Apple. Apple's looking for allies.
Apple's we actually got some pretty interesting movies coming for 2021.
They do, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's gonna work well. Strike a deal with Apple. Put all of the stuff.
Apple Peacock combo.
Yeah, people will watch The Office if it's anywhere, but they're not gonna pay more money just to watch The Office. You've got to have something else. You just do. It's not new. Everyone's seen The Office 400 times. Right. But anyway, we've talked about that literally to death on this podcast, so won't worry too much about it. Last and certainly not least, culture and entertainment. So just so you all know, we changed this one. This one is not 3 stories. This one we went to 5 stories. We put so many on the long list. We're like, let's make it 5. Some of these are fun, are serious. We're going to start with one that I think we've talked about every week since it came out. So probably 3 weeks now. HBO and Warner come to a deal where all of their movies are going to be released both on HBO and in theaters at the exact same time in 2020 or 2021. Obviously, this really impacts 2021, but the announcement sent all kinds of people into a dizzy. Christopher Nolan, but also was widely applauded by a lot of people. A lot of people are excited, like me and you predicted. A lot of people who were not going to go see Dune are going to watch it now. And a lot of people who are not going to watch the what are they calling the Sopranos movie?
The Many Saints of Newark.
Yeah, a bunch of people were not going to watch The Many Saints of Newark. They're going to watch that now. You know what they're going to do right after that? They're going to watch The Sopranos. So people are incredibly excited about this. And again, obviously, absolutely huge news to drop right at the end of 2020. Give everybody something to be excited about in 2021. I'll skip the last one. The one I have here, I'll say it last. The next is an early one. Joe Rogan to Spotify exclusive. Now, everyone who's listened to the first 10 episodes of this podcast knows my opinions on Joe Rogan.
Mhm.
But I think it's safe to say that Joe Rogan deciding in 2020 to be a Spotify exclusive, and more importantly, it launched in 2020. I'm sure he announced it beforehand. I don't know the exact details. And then all of the controversy about being Spotify exclusive that came up in 2020 after he did it.
Yep.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan Spotify deal is one of the most important and ongoing stories of 2020. And there's not much you could say about that. We're a podcast, so we know just how important Joe Rogan is to podcasting. TikTok. I literally just wrote TikTok on the list.
Mhm.
TikTok was, an app, initially an app where you sang like 6 seconds of a music video with your friends. Now it's a star-making, celebrity-producing app. We've talked about 2 of TikTok's biggest stars on this podcast before. They're certainly not the only ones. But TikTok has, again, become synonymous with an entire generation in 2020 because they are,
Yep.
they're just everywhere. Everyone has, I don't have TikTok, by the way, but everybody else has TikTok. Cyberpunk 2077 flops.
Mhm.
I put that one down. We talked about that before. Again, a little bit recent. I've made my stance on the game pretty clear, but the trending wisdom and the wisdom of the internet has told me that I'm wrong. And Sony pretty much confirmed I was wrong when they refunded everyone who bought the game. Didn't matter if there was an issue, by the way. So I looked into it. Microsoft did not. Microsoft, if you had an issue with the game, would refund your game because it wasn't working. But if your game was working, fine. So like mine, by the way, they released, as an update, they released a new patch, which did fix some things, but it made the game look a little worse.
Yeah.
It looks a little older now. Still a fun game, still a good story, still really enjoying it. But as I play through it and get more into it, there's definitely things you're going to need to add, for sure. I mean, not that it changes necessarily the fun factor of the game, but I was going to play through this game 3 times to get all the different, life paths.
Right.
I might just play the beginning 3 times because that's where where the most difference is. I'm gonna just stick to the one playthrough that I'm on now. So I don't know. They definitely have some edits they need to make, but Sony has confirmed what everyone is saying, even though I was not saying it. The game was a massive flop.
Colossus
Not a good
failure.
way. Not
You say
Colossus
that.
failure. I still enjoy the game. I hope they continue to update it. But if you can just say, yeah, I bought this game, I'd like my money back, and the company's like, yeah, sure, no problem. That's crazy.
Mhm.
That's never happened before, just ever. Like a blanket statement. And it's basically a recall. Sony basically issued a recall on Cyberpunk, which has never happened before. Because how do you have a game that's so defective that people are asking for a recall? Usually
Yeah.
recalls are like when your banana is poisoned or the brakes in your Toyota don't work. To have a recall on a video game is insane, and yet we had one just at the very end of 2020. So now CD Projekt Red had just as bad a time as we did in 2020. And last but not least, the cultural and entertainment mecca of the COVID era of 2020, something we have never mentioned on the show before. Tiger King, the documentary, is released this year, this crazy, crazy year of 2020. And it is still the most popular show on Netflix ever. Blanket statement. Queen's Gambit, by the way, we talked about that being very popular. It is the most popular scripted show
Mhm.
that Netflix has ever put out, Queen's Gambit. But the most popular show Netflix has put out, I believe, is still the documentary series about Joe Exotic called Tiger King. So, Matt, I
So,
think we're going to disagree on this one. But what do you think the biggest story was for 2020
no
in
pardon.
culture and entertainment?
No pardon for Joe Exotic.
No. President Trump will not be pardoning Joe Exotic.
So I'd have to go with with HBO Max announcing that they will release movies both streaming and theaters concurrently. I think that I think it's pretty obvious in the sense that a whole activity for generations of Americans back as early as the 20s when movies really started hitting
Yeah.
is going to the movies as an activity. Now it's going to be clearly an option for 2021. I think this really develop and we'll have a true answer about it. If it's long lasting and long term in 2020, at the end of 2021, if they decide we're going to just do this forever or whatever, and if other studios are following suit, doesn't seem to be so far. With the other ones announced. You heard about that joke with nobody coming out. NBC Universal saying exclusively in theaters. I think
well, we talked about that on the show. My opinions on that, but
so. I think that's going to be a whole change in a phenomenon in America. But actually tonight, last week on Friday, a movie theater reopened in Norwalk, the South Norwalk and Westport Avenue bow ties have reopened.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Slowly but surely to come back with that, but I think that I think the real answer to my story won't be answered until 2022. See the answers,
see what the long-term changes are.
Warner Media will announce how well they did, and yeah, somebody who loves movies and a true cinephile, I'll be going to theaters forever. Theaters will not be dying, but it'll be a
change
or you change forever. I don't really think I've seen all these great movies on my phones, on iPads, on projectors. I saw Citizen Kane for the first time on a projector for an intro to film class. So I'm like, it's different for everyone to get there to watch their content. But at the end of the day, we just still want to be entertained by a story.
Yeah. So we disagree. I was right. This is our second disagreement. Mm-hmm. This category is culture and entertainment. It's a cross section. And Tiger King was probably the most culturally relevant show in 2020, almost exclusively because it was a train wreck. But it literally aired at the beginning of a global train wreck.
Yeah.
We were at the very beginnings of what was going to be a 9-month collision of just
exotic.
Yeah, and we got to basically watch it in a sped-up version on Netflix. We didn't even know. We had no way of knowing that. We thought this was going to be a fun little, everyone's going to be home for like a month maybe while they figure it out, and then we'll go back to work. And this was going to be a fun distraction. This was not the case. It was literally a precursor of chaos to the most chaotic year of our lifetime for sure. And for many people's lifetimes, probably. So I think culturally, Joe Exotic will never go away. Carol Baskin killed her husband. I'm not going to say allegedly. We know the truth. And those two will forever be known. They'll never be forgotten. They might lose their clout. They're not going to stay relevant forever. But Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin.
Infamous,
yes, they will live in infamy in our hearts and in our minds as the harbingers of doom that spelled the quarantine era of 2020. I think that's my take. I think that Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin and then the Tiger King documentary represent the culture of America in 2020 to such an extent that they cannot be ignored.
Who knows?
Personal opinion.
And if America as a whole can talk about one particular show like this, even in the streaming world, it's very rare for that. I don't think it'll happen again.
When was the last time it happened?
I don't know.
Didn't happen for Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was close, maybe. This is the final season of Game of Thrones.
That was very niche audience for a specific generation. Like all people of all ages were interested to see the world of Joe Exotic.
Yep.
So, I can't recall. Probably
what is it? Everyone talks. All the older generations talk about Who Shot JR.
Yeah,
on the TV show
essentially,
Dallas.
who shot
It's almost
JR
like
and Mash
if
for that?
I wasn't there. I didn't watch that. I'd never watched a single episode of Dallas.
My
And
dad
I
likes
watched
Dallas a lot.
and I
That was
watched the
great.
final episode of MASH much later. Obviously, was not part of that.
Did you watch the actual series and then it?
No, I watched the last season of MASH. That's it.
You watched the last season of
Or the last episode rather, because I
Oh,
was
you just.
told it was such a big deal, so I wanted
Oh
to know
yeah,
why it was a big deal.
it's a twist ending. If you never saw it truly, I guess it's pretty much a big twist.
Maybe I'll watch the whole thing someday. I don't know, but I like Alan Alda. He was in MASH.
I like the MASH movie. It's
Anyway,
the original
long story
movie.
short, this feels the way that was described to me. Joe Exotic feels that way to me. So
Joe Exotic. I just
exactly.
I can't do an impression.
I
It's
can't
a funny
either.
one.
But anyway, that's it. Went through all 6 of our topics.
Can I
and
just say one thing? So just
Go for
this
it.
last thing with Tire Cake. So yes, I think it's clear. Do you remember that day when they announced, "Oh, the secret special episode of Tire
That
King"?
was so bad.
And everyone goes on,
Joel McHale?
and then Joel McHale shows up. And,
Not good.
And you don't even interview its 2 biggest stars, Kel Baskin. There's no way that
she's not going on TV, right?
ever
Not in
again.
an interview. She went on Dancing with the Stars, but not to an interview.
Obviously, we know what's going on with Joe Exotic. So, what a fail! What a disappointment!
We'll call it legal troubles. Yeah.
Do you feel that they were? I think it's. I mean, they'll never say it on record, but they truly did film it. The filmmakers presented it a different way than it was actually shot to the crew.
Oh yeah, no, they didn't tell them what they were going to do.
Definitely duped. They definitely duped them.
Yeah. This was supposed to be like a fun promo for them, and really, it was them, painting these people as horrible. Rightfully so.
I mean, it's the ultimate reality TV moment,
Absolutely, it was
It's
gotcha.
exactly
Gotcha at its finest.
Next to there was this reality TV show. I'll say it off here. It's not PC.
Yeah, that's fine. So that's it. We went through 2020 as we saw it. Did you have any last reactions to the year of 2020? I think I kicked it off with a pretty good summation of what 2020 has been for most of us. But
this was the year of growth and self-love, and the most. I'm not going to go and say this was the most fun I never want to have again, but it was. It was a profound experience that I can get a lot out of it. So for 2020, thanks for the obstacles, and
thanks for the memories.
I will
even
take,
though they
and I
weren't
will
so
take,
great.
and I will take the lessons learned for 2020 and beyond.
There you go. I would say that obviously 2020 did spawn in its last few weeks a growing podcast network, including 2 brand new podcasts, the Productive Conversations podcast with Matt Brown, and of course our show, the TweetCap. But outside of that, not much more we should be thankful for in 2020.
I will say I caught up on all the big movies.
You did,
caught
yes.
up on
you got
all
through
the
your
culture
movies.
for movies. There's still more to go, but I got all to any major classic that anyone can truly think of, I've seen. I can honestly say that.
And now, and hopefully in 2021,
and there's still more to see.
Your new goal can be to go outside.
Trust me, that for sure is the day that they say. I don't know. I don't know if there'll ever be a day where we have like
there won't be. There won't be an announcement, a declaration, but
like there will come a day. End of World War II, where we see everyone celebrating in Times Square.
We're not getting a ticker tape parade, no. But
I will say want to. I'm celebrating with who's there to celebrate after this intense year for everybody?
Right. I will say this: 2021, whether it's the miracle year we all hope it is, or just a marginally better year, it can't be worse. It can't be worse. So kudos to 2021. On behalf of myself and Matt, I want to say happy holidays and happy new year from the TweetCap to all of you. This is our last episode for the year, so we will see you all in 2021.
See you then, Ryan.
All right.
Happy holidays.
Yes. You too. Stay safe.
It is my birthday this week, so
Oh, yep. Sorry.
New Year's
Before we
Eve,
do the
other
sign off,
holiday.
yes. Shout out for Matt's birthday. So this year, as we celebrate the new year coming in to wash away the old one, we can also celebrate Matt's birthday. But anyway, have a happy birthday. Have a safe birthday. And I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Happy holidays to you and your family, and I'll talk to you soon.